When we talk about pricing at the strategic level, one of the terms that we hear a lot of is called segmented pricing. Can you tell us what exactly segmented pricing is and how firms go about using it?
Segmented pricing is about charging different prices to different customer segments in the market. And it's based on the notion that every customer is not born equal. Different groups and segments in the market will have different willingness to pay or value that they ascribe to your product, and therefore you may be in a position to actually, for the more or less the same offering, get a high or a low price from different segments in the market. Now, one thing you might ask is, why is that interesting? Why is that relevant? What's important about doing segmented pricing? There are a couple of ways of looking at why it's really a valuable tool, for any business. The first is, let's say you're a business and you're wanting to raise price. We all know how much financial impact even a small price change can have on a business if they can implement it in the right way, i.e. if they can manage to maintain their sales even as they're increasing price a little bit to get better margins. But how do you do that in practice, especially if you're in a competitive market where pricing is very visible and there are all kinds of pressures to keep your prices low? Well, one way out is through segmented pricing. Because let's say that you have a goal of wanting to implement a 1% price increase across your customer base. Instead of just simply increasing the price by 1%, you could take some small percentage of your customers, let's say some 10% of your customers, who you see to be the least price sensitive, and you could increase the price for those by 10%. So a 10% price increase for 10% of customers is effectively a 1% overall price increase. Or you could take a smaller group of 5% of your customers who are the least price sensitive and increase the pricing for them by 20%. And so 20% of 5% is again 1%. So segmented pricing offers you a way through which you can effectively increase prices, increase margins, even while protecting your most competitive segment of customers. Another way of thinking about the value of segmented pricing is if you think of the classic demand curve and how when you price, you're effectively choosing a certain point on that demand curve against which you're then getting a certain amount of sales. You're leaving value on the table by doing that. So when you charge a single price, you actually leave value on the table in a couple of ways. One is that, again, if you think about the demand curve, there's a whole class of customers who were open to paying more for your product. But by charging one fixed price, you kind of allow them to get a lot more value than they really, in a sense, needed from the product, from the standpoint of the pricing. So one way that you may be tempted to sort of go back into the market and demand a fair share of the value that is there is by figuring out a mechanism through which you can charge more to those people who are willing to pay more, and that to whom a fixed price was making you leave value on the table. The other kind of value you're leaving on the table is, let's say that you're charging $100 for some electronics or other product that you're selling, but it costs you effectively around $40 to make it. Now you might be charging $100 because that's your sense of the average appeal of the product in the market and how much you can get for it. But what about the people who are willing to pay $50, $60, $70, $80? If you have the capacity to actually supply that market, the only reason you're not is because you're fixed in your pricing to that $100. So if in theory there was a way to attack that market with lower pricing without cannibalizing your higher end customers, wouldn't that be nice? It would allow you to fill more capacity up and actually make more money overall. This last point is especially crucial in situations where companies at times have allowed themselves to sort of ignore the low end, the less appealing part of the market. But as a result, they have created a open sort of beachhead where new competition can sort of quietly slip in under the door and start developing some position for themselves in that low end of the market and gradually start to upgrade its product and offering until they get to be attacked in the core market. And therefore, even just from the standpoint of competitive, like managing the competition in your industry and being proactive in sort of carving out enough of a space for yourself that the competition can't enter, it's an important issue to look at. A couple of good examples are, for example, in the U.S., the automotive industry, which used to be dominated by the big three. They didn't see the quiet way in which the Japanese manufacturers initially came and just sort of gently started to attack them at the low end of the market. Honda, I believe, initially was a motorcycle sort of like phenomenon, and then entered the compact car market. And today, if you look at Honda, Toyota, Nissan, forget compact cars, they're into everything, all the way to SUVs and the luxury car segment. So that's one good example. Canon, again, has done the same thing to Xerox, starting at the low end and going higher. So for a couple of those reasons, one is to slip in a price increase to the least sensitive part of the market, and the other is to make sure you don't leave value on the table and also protect yourself from low-end competition. Those would be the reasons I would say segmented pricing is an important thing.
If a firm decides that segmented pricing sounds like a good idea, how should it go about implementing a system of segmented pricing?
There are a lot of businesses who are intrigued about it, but who stay away from implementing it because of certain myths that they're sort of afraid about. So for instance, one myth out there is that segmented pricing is a good thing, but I don't want to annoy my customers. So if I charge different prices to different segments and they come to know, the segments that I'm charging a high price to come to know about it, they're going to get very unhappy. And I don't want to make my customers unhappy, and therefore it's not the right thing in my industry. In fact, there are a number of mechanisms that you can use to implement segmented pricing, which do not require you to, in a sense, really put it out there in a very overt way so that customers end up feeling very unhappy about being charged different prices for the same product.